So yeah, this is going to be about V2 of Ionic. Who's heard of Ionic before? Awesome. Who's actually used something or has shipped some code out with Ionic? Who's just messed around with it? Okay. So I will preface everything that I'm about to say with, this is still in alpha. Things probably, definitely, most likely will change. While APIs may look different at the final release, we're looking at high-level concepts. We're not really talking about, here's all the reasons why we've chose this API. We're talking about what's the idea behind the API. And since we're talking about V2, we can't go on about it without mentioning V1. So Ionic V1 has, it's kind of taken over. It's kind of crazy to see how popular it's become. And for those who don't know what Ionic is, just in case, so a complete framework for building native mobile apps using just web technology. So everything, if you're a web developer, can write HTML and a little bit of JavaScript, you're good to go. You need to talk to the Bluetooth or any kind of device sensor. You have the right APIs and plugins to do that. It's built on top of Angular for code structure, these reusable components called directives, all good stuff. And everyone's we think it's pretty awesome, but so don't a lot of other people. It's become one pretty popular project on GitHub with over 20,000 stars. Not that that's any measure of real popularity, it's just nice to mention. But we do know that we've had over 1 million apps started with our CLI tooling. So anytime someone starts an app, we get like a little hit saying that, hey, someone ran this command. So it's pretty active. We have a lot of meetup groups all around the world. So places, Montreal, Toronto, US, Paris, Brazil. We have fans all over the world. People are actually using this and talking about it. And it's been part of some apps inside major app stores that have actually gotten featured. So has anyone ever heard of an app called Sorkit? Okay. So Sorkit is this health and fitness app. It was originally built by one guy. Wrote it in one framework, completely rewrote it in Ionic, and it's now been featured in both the iOS and App Store and Google Play. Has over 2 million downloads, and it's consistently a 4+ review, 4 out of 5. So Ionic has seen some adoption in both kind of startup land and also some larger enterprisey companies. No one that we can really name, but a lot of financial institutions, et cetera, et cetera. And Ionic is pretty great. I know before I joined the team when I was using it, I thought it was really great. But a lot's changed since it was originally released. It was first released in any way, shape, or form in 2013. So 2 years ago, just about 2 years ago now actually. It's a pretty long time. Who remembers what was on TV 2 years ago? Breaking Bad ended that year. The Office was done. We lost some good shows. And that's even an even longer time in web technology. To think about it, what were our best phones back then? iPhone 5 running iOS 6. Think about iOS 6 for a second, and just think about how far we've come. Android was still fragmented around 4.1 and 2. And then Android 2.3 was still a thing. Not the majority, but it was still around. So a lot's changed since 2013. We have iOS 9. Android 5 is now starting to see a lot of adoption, but even more so, we have the new version of Android going to be coming out later on. We have a lot better capabilities on our devices, and we have a lot less bad devices. So we're not seeing these kind of underpowered Android devices anymore. Everyone's got at least something usable. We have a lot better APIs in the browser, and we have better browsers. I know it sounded like I was picking on Android, but we actually have to give it credit because now you have the same Chrome that you get on the desktop as the system browser. So the same desktop-powered Chrome that you have is now on your phone, and that's incredible. And the truth is, V2 is going to be that same powerful framework that V1 provides, but it's going to be built for what we have right now as far as devices and browser capabilities and APIs, and everything that could be coming in the next 5 years, so to speak, hopefully. So, I mean, obvious places we want to look for goals is, performance is definitely going to be something that everyone wants. But we want to go back and make sure that we make the framework even more simpler to use. So, getting rid of some redundancies here and there, make it just much more streamlined. We want to make sure that you can essentially do whatever you want, wherever you want, and make it super easy to customize and get really low level when you want it to. And we want to push the native UX and UI more. We already do it a little bit in V1, but we want to go all the way into doing this and making whatever you have and ship on feel like it's right at home. So I could keep talking about this, but let's kind of look over some demos. And if you guys, I was a bad speaker. I did not upload a PDF of my slides, mostly because I have interactive demos in this presentation. So let's actually, nope, Hardington. So if you go to, probably not going to be able to see that, so we'll paste that here. So if you go to that website, that's the slides that I'm actually going through right now. So if you want to look at that now or follow along later, that's the website. If not, I will tweet this out later on, so be sure to follow me. So, back to the demos. So simplicity. And we're just going to take a look at what the example is. So any front-end framework, obviously the thing that they all do is they ship you with a bunch of classes. So a bunch of CSS classes. We're just going to throw them on our code, and we're going to have everything look nice and well formatted. Okay, so we want to make a button. Make an A tag, add a class of button. Okay, well now we want this button to be outlined, and now we want it to be green, and when someone hovers on it, we want it to be bright purple, and then when someone double clicks on it, we want to grow 5 different sizes. There's a lot of complexity into all of this. And then when you want to add an icon, do you put the icon as a child of the button? Do you put it as an attribute as a class on the button? Where do all these things go? And then if you actually look at this markup, let's see. This kind of, it looks fine, but inside of an entire page, that's it's kind of just cluttered and confusing. And that's kind of what we realize is that the core of the Ionic framework, it's heavily reliant on classes, and it gets really confusing when you start to when you want to start actually using things. Where do we put this class? What gets classes? What are all the available classes? There's just too many of them. So we decided to do some house cleaning and move as much as we could to either elements or properties that you can put on an element, because they're just as easy to understand and even easier to override. So that same example will not look that close. We're going to look at this. So this is the same exact example from before, but now everything's been reduced using these properties. So you want a button that's going to actually display like a button on a mobile device. just use a button tag. Do you want to have a link but actually make it look like it kind of is a button? Okay, well, create your A tag and then add the property button. It's so much simpler. You want to make sure that you have an icon on this button. Okay, well, now we've gone out and created our own icon element for it. And just put that as a child of the button. It becomes much easier to understand. And then your markup looks much cleaner. And from the demo, you notice this is how it all looks, and everything still works fine. And everything gets the proper look and feel based on what platform they're on without you having to do anything. So this is all the markup for all of this is button primary, secondary, danger, light, and dark. Very simple stuff. And they're equally easy to overwrite and extend. If you want to work with these properties yourself, you can just use the square brackets. So what these square brackets do is essentially the same way that you would select something in CSS using a class. You can just use these square brackets, put the property that you want, and go ahead and style everything there. Don't want to use them and you want to just go back to classes? That's fine. The good thing about classes is that they are more specific than the properties, so they'll override whatever the property has on it already. So we're using them currently with the V2 framework. We are making sure that code that you write is actually much simpler and easier to understand. And we're not going to force you, though, to write all your styles that way, because not everyone wants to, not everyone should, but so you can easily override it using classes. And kind of going off of that feel, we're going to jump into the native UX and design and something that we had in V1 called platform continuity. So you write your code once, and then no matter what platform you're on, it adapts. We did this with a few of our components in V1 where, for instance, say the tabs bar. We'd have tabs on our page. For iOS, it'd be at the bottom of the page with a navigation bar at the top. But on Android, it has a completely different pattern where it should be the nav bar, and then the tabs, and then the views that get rendered. But that was just using some CSS and platform detection to figure out how that all worked. With V2, we're pushed this even further by just diving in, using a lot more CSS and a lot more JavaScript to create completely different interactions. So this first one, I kind of mentioned it briefly, is this icon directive, icon component, where here we just have a list of icons, and we're passing them the icon that we actually want. But what's great about this is that once we're on the platform, it'll automatically detect what platform we're on and load the appropriate icon for this. So here I'm kind of faking iOS, and it's loading all the iOS-specific icons. So if, for instance, this home, it has an iOS version, load that. But if we switch over to Android, we have the Android-styled icon, which makes more sense because it's on Android. These are the visual cues that Android users know. They'll pick up on this. Things like Twitter icon, it's its own brand. So there really isn't an iOS and Android-specific version of it. There's just that one. And then you can actually come down and tweak these on a platform basis. So if you want the iOS icon on both Android and on iOS, you can say, just give me it for both of these platforms and override the changes. Example of a component that we started doing that you interact with programmatically, and something that we were doing with V1 is the action sheet. So now we have this iOS action sheet where it still has the same look and feel that you would expect for iOS, but if we switch over to Android, it has its own completely different look and feel. And that also goes as far as including these icons down at the bottom. Now what you notice is that iOS doesn't really have those icons. Doesn't really need to. So we can just remove those as soon as we get everything all set up. So now that we know that we're on Android, we'll insert the icons, but when we load up our code and go back to iOS, we don't need them. You'll notice that we'll get that nice Android ripple. I don't know if you guys can see it. Too fast. Maybe you'll see it up here. Yeah. That Android ripple that everyone loves. This one is probably my most favorite change that we have. And this is our side menu component. So native iOS, when you start to swipe left or right, whatever side the menu is on, the actual main app content will move over and reveal the menu underneath. Android has a completely different approach where the menu should overlay. And of course it wants to do this. Okay. So this is a typical iOS one where it'll follow that one-to-one drag gesture ratio. It's being a little weird because it's a mouse, but as you start to drag, it works. Go to different pages, it should close the menu. But for Android, and again, still none of the code has changed. This is still just the same stuff that I wrote, just mocking the platform. I now have the overlay, having it overlay and hide the app content. And I can still drag it, still go back, navigate around, interact with it programmatically, and do everything that you've kind of been used to in V1. And there's also a third reveal type called push, where the actual app content and the side menu will both move at the same time, if that's something that you want. Now, if you don't supply a reveal type, it'll automatically detect the platform and provide the right one. But you can, again, you can still override it and have either a consistent reveal type or change it on a platform basis. So this is all still highly configurable. The animations, navigations, completely reworked from the ground up. Before it was kind of this weird mixture of CSS and JavaScript. Now we have this nice friendly animation using Web Animations API. If you guys haven't heard about it, I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. But these make it super easy to create custom platform-specific animations based on the views, where we can finally have like a pretty convincing Android view animation. But what's even easier, or even better, is that the API to create your own animation. So maybe you want to go back to the iOS 4 flipboard kind of animation that everyone would love. You could easily write that. And again, all of the things that you can do for the platform continuity, they're super easy to configure and override and start adding your own changes in there. So navigation is a really big one. So it's going to get its own slide because this really goes beyond just saying, how do I get around my app? How does my app and how does my user experience the app? So it kind of came down to a few questions that we heard constantly. I want to open up a modal and then have some kind of navigation inside that modal. Or I want to have a side view and be able to navigate inside of that side view while keeping another portion of my app static. So if you've ever used the Mail app on iPad, if you go from your mailbox to a threaded message, you'll navigate around in that little sidebar, but the main content won't load until you've actually tapped the last message. And this kind of wasn't possible with V1. Bring it up a little bit. This wasn't possible with V1 just because of the way routing and navigation in general was kind of set up. It was all coupled to a URL. The URL was the one truth of how your app should navigate. UI router was very limiting in this aspect because even though it is a state machine, it still needs a URL portion of it. So we completely reworked our navigation system and went from the ground up saying, you don't need to use URLs. So what does that actually look like? So we'll look at this V1 example. And this is a pretty standard, simple setup where we have a bunch of states supplying a template to all of them, a URL, the last state being a dynamic state where you can load in a particular item. And this is all using UI router. So if you know UI router, this is all common. But again, you don't get the flexibility that you want because if you want to do anything kind of more complicated or in-depth than that, you're kind of out of luck. So to actually go forward and kind of recreate the experience that you would want your user to have, we kind of borrowed a method from Native. They've had great navigation metaphors called push and pop. So there is a app navigation stack. Do you want to go to a different view? You just push that onto the navigation stack. Do you want to go back? You just pop that view off the stack. It's a simple metaphor, but it actually makes navigation a lot more freeing. So you can push a new navigation stack onto another navigation stack and have some kind of navigation stack inception style going on where you're navigating all over the world. But it's even funnier is now we can do infinite loops. So focus on this guy. So just a list of random items. And as I navigate around, you'll notice that this shows up. And it's just going to pass along some data every single time that we're navigating around. So and now we've just navigated to the same state over and over and over. This kind of thing wouldn't have been possible with V1 because it doesn't, if you try to navigate to the same state again, it's going to look at you and just say, the URL says you're already here. Why are you trying to go here again? Now we can actually do that if you really want to. So we can traverse the whole navigation stack back, going all the way back to our main view, and then open our menu again and go back to the getting started page. So it gives you the full control to do whatever you want as far as, all right, now load this state or load this page, but then also load these subsequent pages so that way I can kind of dynamically create my application stack or my navigation stack. So that way if I load from an external link into my app on a friend's detail page, I can create that whole navigation stack dynamically and create the experience of being able to tap the back button and go back to my main page. You can pop views out of the stack dynamically as you want. So if you have 4 views in your stack and you want to get rid of the first and third one, it's as simple as supplying the index for those and get them out. You can also add them. And then you can do this great thing where if you're on, say you're on like a page inside of your stack that's like 50 views deep, you can just go say, okay, bring me back to the root. And it'll automatically say, okay, I'm 50 views back from the root, and it'll handle that navigation all for you and keep that navigation stack in sync. Now, if you do want a URL, it does give you the ability to navigate around, and then you tell the URL where you should be at. So it kind of takes what we are used to with V1 and traditional kind of navigation, and just flips the roles. So now the navigation tells the router, we're here, make this the URL. But we're inside mobile apps. Why do we need a URL? We're going to look at let's look at some of the creative stuff for who's a designer in this room. Yes, so, I like designing. So we'll talk about Sass because that's what designers should be working in. Anything else is heresy. With V1, we shipped with an option to enable Sass if you really wanted it. If you didn't, you were stuck with CSS. And what that kind of ended up giving us was a bunch of apps out there in the market that looked like Ionic apps. Your app should actually look like what you're trying to promote. So if your brand or company has its own style guidelines, you should be following that, and we should be making it easy to allow you to do that. So with V1, we kind of hard-coded all of our colors in a single line. So these are all the colors that you got, and they kind of were obscure, mood-based colors. This is what happens when you let designers name things. You get moods and emotions. But there was a whole bunch of colors, and if you didn't need any of those colors, too bad, you're stuck with them. If you wanted to add like more colors, well, now you have to go dig through every single Sass file, find where something was using that, using another example, copy, paste, and work with that. Not fun. So we did something, once you kind of think about what this is doing, you can say, oh, well, duh, why wouldn't you have done that before? Something called a map. So this is essentially an object. So we can actually start looping through this object and saying for each value in this object, or each key value pair, here's the name, here's the value. For, say, a tabs component, go through this entire loop, create the CSS for all of this. You only have the declaration for the tabs once in a single loop. You have all the colors that you're defining up here, simple to use, and easy to configure. But this is also great for trying to define your own brand colors. So the primary color, I've kept it as a nice blue, because I think blue is a pretty good color. And then I created my fictional brand that has the color of a bright neon yellow, because blue and yellow go great together for readability. And whenever I generate all the Sass and or take the Sass and generate the CSS, I'm only going to get those 2 colors. Every component in my CSS style sheet will only contain the primary colors and my brand colors. Has an added benefit of slimming down your CSS a little bit, but it makes going over things and kind of expanding it and fine-tuning all those styles, super easy to do. And this one is actually really, really cool. And if you guys get nothing from this talk, I want you to go look up this API and just kind of learn it, because it's probably going to be the best API. I don't care about object.observe. I'm talking about the web animation API. And it fixes all the problems that we had in V1. Because, like I said, V1 was a weird mix of CSS and this Frankenstein JavaScript coming in here and hijacking everything. And if you wanted to create your own animations, I'd point to people, here's a configuration class for all the animations, have fun, because no one wants to really do this. You want to do just CSS animations? Okay, well, you can do CSS animations, but then you lose the cool things like swipe to go back or having any kind of control. CSS animations only have 2 states, 1 and 0, or 0% and 100%. Once that class is applied, you can't really do anything with it. And this is where Web Animations API comes in and totally saves the day, because it brings you everything that you love about CSS animations and everything that you love about JavaScript, and has a standard API for it. So we'll take a quick look at what it looks like. So we have an animation here. And first 2 lines are just kind of creating a new animation, registering a name. And the first line, we're actually just getting that lovely little robot that we have. His name's Ionitron. He kind of has feelings. He's a robot, so he shouldn't. We have the spin, and then we're just going to pass in the target that we want to animate. And then that spin animation is going to have a from state and a to state. And this is kind of, if you've ever done like CSS keyframe animations, it's a similar concept where you have a 0% and then a 100%. So in here, we want to animate the transform property and just take it from rotate 0 degrees to a full 360 rotation. Then we want to register that animation afterwards. And then from here, we can actually programmatically call this. So if we come down here, that's pretty awesome. I don't get why you guys aren't like applauding for that. What's even cooler is that same animation that we've had where we can programmatically call it and play it. Oh boy, you bet we can pause it. And if I were to put a little toggle in here, I could actually start dragging the toggle or dragging the slider and map the value of the slider to the animation rotation and kind of create this interactive play. That's really cool. And again, the API tag, it doesn't show pause here, but pause is just a method, and you call this.animation.pause. Save it.
This is the window? Is that the window? This animation?
This.animation? No, it's the class. So it's the, yeah. So that that syntax is super simple and really powerful. Again, and kind of the general message that I got when I looked at the Web Animations API is that it's a CSS-friendly syntax, but it gives you things like callbacks. It gives you things like variables. Everything that you kind of like about JavaScript and all the performance that you get from CSS animations. And this is, surprisingly, baked into Chrome natively. So something Chrome did right. And it's actually really performant on Android. So if you think about it, Android kind of is the one that's always had issues with performance. Well, with Web Animations API, it actually has a lot better performance right out of the box because it's natively baked in. iOS doesn't have support for it yet, but there is a polyfill in place to give you the same performance that you get on Android and kind of fix the gaps where iOS has dropped the ball. So Sass, enabled by default, makes it super easy to customize your styles and fit your branding guidelines. Web animations, which we all should be going out and researching and investigating and learning everything about it. Being used as our animation core, super easy to customize again, super easy to interact with, friendly syntax, everything that you want in an animation library. Let's see, kind of future-proof. How do we want to make sure Ionic's code is actually usable in 2 to 3 years, or built using the standards that may come out in ES 2016 or possibly ES 2017 or JavaScript 6 and 7, because I just don't want to call it ES 20 something. So everyone knows JavaScript's gone through some changes. It's kind of grown up as a programming language and gone from the silly little scripting language that everyone thought it was to being able to do some pretty cool applications with it. ES5 was the version of JavaScript that we've had for years and we all know and love. And Ionic 1 was built with it. And Angular 1x is built with ES5. But ES6 is finally standardized and starting to ship in all the browsers. And Angular 2 is actually pushing you to adopt the new ES6 syntax. You may have to have a build step involved, but it's all for the better. And while it may look different, this is still our thing. It's still kind of syntactic sugar on things that you're already doing. But ES6 does have some features which fix things that ES5 kind of messed up. So we have a proper modular system where not everything is on the global scope. We can actually import things and export things. We have proper block scoping with let. So that way we don't have variables getting hoisted up, and we try to do a for loop and actually log out the value of I every single time you loop through it. And all of a sudden, after the loop's done, you only see that final value. In ES6, if you were to do that and use let, you'd be fine. We have promises baked into the language natively, so we wouldn't need to use promise libraries like $Q. We could just do this natively in the language. And we have the class syntax. So depending on what your opinion on classes are, again, it's kind of syntactic sugar for working with JavaScript's prototype change. But it just makes writing all this stuff simpler and easier to understand. And kind of more interestingly is Typescript. Microsoft is kind of killing it right now with Typescript, and I personally really like it because it gives you everything that ES6 has, plus some stuff from ES7, and then this optional static typing. So people coming from other programming languages such as C#, you know that typings are everything. You can actually have this in your JavaScript code and have your editor kind of analyze all your APIs. And anytime you try to call something, as soon as you hit that dot, you'll get a list of all the available methods for it. So for example, our action sheet, there's an open and then there's a close. You could get that. But you can pick whatever one you want. If you want to use ES6, you can use that. If you want to use TypeScript and get that code completion inside of your editor, you can get that. You can use that as well. And we'll have the build steps in place to figure out what needs to be done to each file type. A nice idea is that you could start off your project inside ES6, and then as you know, hopefully your team gets larger and larger. There's no possible way to keep everybody in sync, well, then you might want to start switching over to TypeScript and do it piece by piece, so you could have one component that is written completely in TypeScript, while the rest of them are in ES6. And as you go, you just start converting everything. And like I said, the build system will handle that no matter what. So it'll just take whatever you give it and output ES5. So before I kind of go over a demo and actually show you what Ionic 2 code actually looks like in the wild, if you need to build an app and you want to build it using web technologies, use Ionic 1. It's still a great solution. It's stable. It's out there. It's well tested. Ionic v2 will be everything that Ionic v1 is, but with all the lessons that we've learned over the past 2 years, and giving you a much more powerful and modern API. So with that, again, if you want to look at the slides, that is the link. But I will subject you guys to Vim real quick. And then I'm just going to start up a server. So our CLI has been updated to work with the v2 setup. It's still in flux, so we won't really pay attention to it too much today. But if you've ever done any project with Ionic, you know that we come with some standard templates to kind of explore the various different layouts that you could use. So we went and kind of recreated all those templates again using, make sure this actually looks, there we go. Recreated all those templates using Ionic 2. So we still get the same kind of tab-based interface where we can navigate around. We can see everyone, slide to delete in person if I really wanted to. I have my toggle. But let's switch over to Android, reload it. I now get the Android or material design look and feel. I get that nice ripple on the tab bar as I navigate around. Let's see if I can actually scroll in the whole screen. That toggle though. You get the nice ripple effect as you tap the item to turn it on and off. We go to all the different items. We get the proper animation where as you click on an item, it'll kind of animate the view from the source of the click. So in this case, I'm going to click on Perry, and the view will animate from its origin. But again, what does all this code look like? So we can think about it as kind of this modular piece-by-piece structure. So for that dashboard, well, obviously everything for Dash is inside Dash. We have the markup for it, where we're defining a navigation bar, and this is just going to bring, supply the instance of our global nav bar. Using this pound navbar sign right here, or star navbar. We'll give it the view title, and then that's it for navigation bar. We'll come over to this list. And notice that it looks a little different, but we now have some elements that aren't really directives, but just CSS styled. So we have ion card. We gave it a header, ion card header, ion card content, pretty simple things. This is all static, so not anything too interesting. But if we look at the chats tab, oh, what's going on here? So we have all the ES6 stuff that come with Angular 2 and Ionic 2. So we're importing a bunch of different things. We're importing some data that's just going out and returning JSON for me. And then I'm importing another component in here. So I have this annotation class right here, @page. And all this is really doing is just taking the template that I'm providing it and creating a view that I can navigate to. I have this class down here called Chats. And what I'm doing in here is just setting up everything. So I have my navigation controller instance. I have the friends. And then I can call my friends service and actually just get all the data, all the JSON back from that. How do I navigate around? Well, we also called this, when we injected the nav controller, it has that method push on it. So we can say this.nav.push, and then I'm going to push the chat detail page, but I'm also going to pass along some data with it. So this data could be an object, it could be a string, it could be whatever you want. But since we're calling it in programmatically, if we look at that template, I have my item. If I figure out where there we go. I'm saying on click, navigate, call the pass chat, which is my nav.push, and then I'm actually going to pass in that instance of chat. So let's look at chat. Chat is even simpler. We're just going to import nav params. We're going to actually query the params, and we're just going to get the variable that we set. And we can actually look at what it does. So we're going to just console.log params. So if we go back here, it'll reload, do all of its thing. Let's see how we can. That looks pretty good. So we have this data object in here. And this is all the parameters that we've passed along in our nav.push. So now we have the entire list of information about my boss, Ben. And I didn't have to do anything like query the URL bar and get like the params for that. I didn't have to set that up in I didn't have to set that up in anywhere that involved my routing. I just passed along some information, and I could pass along whatever I wanted. If I want to pass along a string, that would show up. But even cooler is we're going to show how we can actually push the navigation a little bit more. So we're going to create another method on here, say go to dash. I'm going to come up here, just import from and I'm just going to pull in dash. And before I forget, nav controller. And what we're doing here is we're pulling in the nav controller class and injecting it into our constructor. And then we'll say this dot nav is going to equal the nav instance that I injected. So when I come down here, I can say this dot nav dot push make sure that I got that actually spelled correctly. Yeah. I can push dash. And if I create this button in here, just add the click handler for it, equals go to dash. Let's see how this actually works. I just navigated inside of a tab to another view that's actually wired as a root to another tab, and if I wanted to, I could just push a new instance of that entire tab navigation stack and start the whole process all over again. So everything's really flexible, and it wasn't that hard to actually wire all this up. So I want you guys to go out and try it, to give it a look. If you go to ionic.io/2. Cool, you guys have been awesome. Thank you very much.